Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode. We're here with a very special guest, Neal from Tapcart. Hey, man, thanks for jumping on.
Hey, thanks so much, Preston, for having me. Excited to be here.
Of course, man. So let's talk about what's happening with iOS 16, what brands can do, and how you're helping brands with new strategies that are pretty cutting edge, I got to say. Let's chat about it, man.
Yeah, so if you're managing a brand or overseeing the e-com operations of a brand, you remember iOS 14, what happened, right? Where uh, essentially all of the Facebook privacy issues that kind of ended up sending customer acquisition costs through the roof for virtually every brand, right? So customer acquisition was just a different animal from then on, right? And then when you fast forward to iOS 15 that went into effect earlier this year. Again, this is where Apple is now setting its sights on email, right? And email privacy. And so as a result, brands that are sending their email campaigns are seeing open rates go down. They're seeing more emails going to that promotions tab in Gmail. And so when you think of all of these things, like these are the ways a brand acquire and retains a customer, and one by one they're kind of being negatively impacted by virtue of what Apple's doing. And again, Apple's doing this all with the interest of the end customer or consumer in mind, right? This actually benefits us in terms of consumer privacy in the end, right? So now fast forward to today, just about 3-4 weeks ago, Apple unveiled and launched iOS 16. And so iOS 16 essentially is now taking that sniper rifle and moving it right over to the SMS world, right? When you think about
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
though, that's where brands who have leveraged SMS are really, you know, kind of stirred up right now.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people and even the marketing agency space for ecom know about this. And even brands are still kind of shocked that this is happening and what's going on. So, what does this mean for people who go, look, I don't care about email. We're still executing email, but our SMS with the open rates and the click through rates and the conversion rates that are happening there, we're going to be fine. We don't need to diversify into other channels. But you're saying, no, that's not true. It's about to be, I mean, a bloodbath for people who are on SMS because you're going to be going into a different folder on Apple devices.
You're absolutely right. So when you think about when iOS 14 was first unveiled, nobody panicked, right? Agencies didn't
Right.
panic, brands didn't panic. Wasn't until after you saw those effects where the panic really kind of began and the customer acquisition costs started going up, right? And so when you think about that, that's why no one's really panicking just yet, because right now iOS 16 in its full form is currently in the process of being rolled out, right? It's done a partial rollout thus far, right? So there's two major impacts and changes that are happening with iOS 16. The focus of iOS 16 is moving less away from the data privacy pieces and more on giving the customer or the end user more control over their actual device, right? And so when you think about that, the first change is for the very first time, when you receive a text message or an SMS from an unknown number, underneath that text message, you're going to see a report junk button. And that wasn't there before. That was previously only available on
Right.
iMessage. Now it's been expanded to all of SMS. And so when you think about previously, brands are typically used to high opt-out rates on SMS. They're pretty accustomed to that, and they're okay with that just because at the end of the day, we want customers that are engaging anyway, right, to be the focus of our SMS.
Right.
But that opt-out happened by the customer saying replying stop. That information goes back to the brand pulls it out of the subscriber list. That communication was just the customer and the brand, right? Now
Right.
Apple has made it easier and just with a one click button, report junk. Now this message actually doesn't get sent to the brand, it actually gets sent to the mobile carrier, T-Mobile, Verizon, right? So not only will the
Oh, okay.
user not receive these text messages anymore from that brand, but eventually, because with brands that are heavily reliant on SMS, eventually they're going to get a lot of these by the natural high opt-out rates that exist, and eventually T-Mobile and Verizon are going to flag the brand as a spammer, right? And so that's where they're going to see interruptions in campaigns, blocked campaigns, and things like that, right? So that's
Right.
just the
Right.
first change, but that's really just going to impact the brand's efficacy of being able to kind of get in front of their audience, right? That's change number one.
Yeah.
When we think about the second change, we're talking about the filtering system that's been launched, right? Now that hasn't been fully deployed yet. That's in the process of being rolled out. That'll be out in 16.2, 3, and 4. This is the one to really look out for, right? And so when you think about, if you remember when that dreaded promotions tab came to Gmail,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
it basically, the open rates went straight down from there, and all of a sudden, users are not seeing those messages. That same promotions tab is now coming to SMS, right? In fact, there's
Oh
going to
my
be a filtering
gosh.
system where, right now when a brand sends an SMS, it lands right in that primary text thread that everyone is dealing with, mom,
Right.
dad, and brand, right? All in that same text thread. Now, there's going to be a separate folder for promotions or financial updates from your bank or flagged spam, right? Enough report junks, it's automatically going to get put into that junk folder, right? So now there's this filtering system. So brands that we work with right now are already forecasting somewhere between a 30 to 35% drop in open rates, right?
Oh my goodness. On SMS.
On SMS, right? Like brands love SMS because of the high open rate factor, 95% open rates, because you can't avoid seeing a text message unless it gets caught in a folder, right? And that's where you're going to still see better open rates than email across the board because it's a text message, but
Sure.
the likelihood of it actually ever getting seen is going down in a huge way.
Wow. So people and brands, I guess, who have kind of built their business around, real-time texting to their subscribers, customers, this is all changing. But it's not all bad news, right? So what can people do, post iOS 16 to help mitigate some of this and prep for the future?
Yeah, the brands we work with, again, we launch mobile apps for brands on Shopify, Shopify Plus. And so when you think about like, email being an owned channel for brands, SMS being another owned channel where they truly control their audience, the third owned channel is push notifications, right? And so when you think of push notifications, they rival the open rates of SMS. Like pre iOS 16 rival those same open rates, over 90% open rates, right? Because it's still landing on that customer's home screen. The difference is push notifications are unimpacted by iOS 16 and its update. In fact, if you think about what push notifications are, push notifications were living in Apple's world from the very beginning. It's tied directly to an app
Right.
in Apple's App Store, right? And so when you think about that, brands that are leveraging push notifications successfully are also doing SMS already, right? SMS and push notifications actually, they don't need to be a total replacement. They actually work beautifully hand in hand. But now you're seeing brands like panicking, trying to get their users opted into push and drive more adoption of their app than what they've already had simply by virtue of what's going to be happening over the course of 2023 with SMS.
So all the smart brands are investing in apps, getting those launched, getting their users trained. Download the app, subscribe to push notifications, and that's your new shopping experience. Because really, it's probably got to be stickier too, right? And have higher conversion rates, and really just instead of having a mobile optimized website, the app that you guys build is streamlined, right? For Shopify. So I'm sure it works great, right?
That's exactly right. When you think of SMS, SMS is a retention marketing channel. Email is a retention marketing channel. Push notifications are a retention marketing channel and a sales channel because, while an SMS might push to a website that's converting at 2 or 3%, the push notification is pushing to an app that is going to convert probably twice or 3x what a mobile website ever could achieve, right? Simply by virtue of a more
Wow.
seamless shopping experience, right? So you're seeing higher open rates, a channel with the highest possible open rates out of any owned channel now, right? So on the retention marketing front, but then combined with the highest possible converting channel at the same time, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%. So you personally, do you subscribe to SMS from brands that you like?
I do. I do. I mean, if you think about it, I'm quite selective with which brands apps I download. right? I'm not downloading every brand's apps. I mean, like we all have Amazon on our home screen, but then the other brand's apps that I've downloaded are the ones that like I absolutely love, right? And the goal of an app is actually not meant to target everybody, right? Anybody and everybody. It's actually more
Right.
meant to focus on like that top 10 to 30% of the most loyal base and give them this immersive experience over the course of the relationship with the customer. And so that's where if I'm downloading those apps, I'm also going to opt into notifications because why did I take that step to download that app in the first place? I want to be in the know. I want that early discount. I want that early access to a product. I want that, new alligator strap watch brand that was just, dropped. So all of these things, like that's where, um, um, push notifications really come into play. And then also when you think of opt-in rates, opt-in rates are quite high on Tapcart, right? When you think of opt-in rates, typically over 80%. Again, going back to who is that customer that's actually taking the step to download that app? That's someone that's looking for that, you know, more immersive experience, deeper brand experience. They want to be in the know.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, just my own bias, right? Like, I'll give my email to most brands. When you start asking for my phone number, then it's like, oh, do I really want to deal with that? It's more intricate, right? It's more intimate. Excuse me. So then, when you go to downloading an app, I'm going, okay, now you're going to be on my home screen. I know you're going to push notification me. So if, is this, and I think this is what you're saying, is it's really getting more into the advocacy, right, of like, hey, the people who really love you and want to know everything about your brand. And it's not just, speaking from a marketing perspective, buy, here's a sale here. It's more community driven as well, with other people that are interested, so you're connecting people and not just making it sales focused, right?
That's exactly right. Where push and the app lives is in the lowest part of the funnel, right? So when you think of like, when it comes to top of funnel traffic, just bring anybody and everybody to the website, right? Then when you think of your email and SMS campaigns, you think of, okay, they probably bought something before, they were offered a discount to buy something. And then when you think of like who's actually going to take that step to download that app, it's typically even a little bit lower in that funnel, someone that's probably done a second purchase already at that point, right? Now, when you think about what makes an app successful, it's you really need a really tiny fraction of your total audience to really download an app to make it a success. It's once they download it, where you're living on their home screen, where they're staring at their phone 6 hours a day, scrolling left and right across the brand's icons. And
Right.
that is what drives that. Now, speaking to what you mentioned on like why would like, oh my gosh, I'm giving them a piece of my home screen. Well, that's also up
Right.
to the
Right.
brand to educate like why they should download the app. What's the value to the customer? Whether it's unique discounts, whether it's that community you spoke of, like that's what an app can do. It can be designed for all of these multiple purposes to give a unique sense of community for your super loyal fans and users, right?
And so if somebody wants to launch an app for their brand, a brand they're working with, right? If they don't use you guys, how does that work? I think most people go, I don't even know a developer I could trust to do this. And then, they're quoted 25, 30 grand, right, to launch it. There's developer certificates. It's a huge mess, right? But with you guys, it sounds like you've streamlined this whole process for Apple, for the iOS store, and for Android, right? And your connection with Shopify makes it pretty easy, right?
That's exactly right. Tapcart allows you to launch a mobile app that sits on top of your Shopify store. So there's no need to manage two different storefronts. We're actually tying into your existing storefront. And the goal is to minimize the lift to launch that app. So, gone are the days of needing to hire an agency or a developer, spend six figures on launching that app when it can be done truly turnkey, where you can have total full freedom on design and what the experience looks like, but then also have it talk in real time to your backend systems, whether it's Shopify, Klaviyo, your loyalty programs, your review programs, like all these other tools in a merchant's tech stack that they're leveraging can be integrated with using an app. And so you can, instead of taking many months to launch that app, you can get that app live in 10 to 14 days. So you can essentially
Wow, that's amazing.
prove the app as a sales channel as you go. Instead of making this long run investment, hoping for the best, you're actually able to see those results firsthand as you go because of the speed to launch and the ability for us to be a partner in driving that adoption.
And you talked about this briefly, some of the stats that brands are seeing in apps. I mean, you can track everything that's happening in your app, right? With you guys. You can see what people are looking at, all the standard metrics, right?
100%. You're going to be able to see all parts of your app, how it's performing, what's doing well, what's not. When you think about an app or any experience for that matter, even your website, you're always kind of beta testing or A/B testing, wanting to see, what's working, what's not. That's what they say in D2C, always be testing. And that's exactly what you can do with your app is to be able to keep looking at that data in real time. Like, for instance, which push notification journeys are working, which ones are not, which ones are converting at a higher level and resonating with the customers, which ones are not. And so being able to adapt on that and then taking things a step further on like how we actually look at that data and make something of it as a strategy is the fact that Tapcart has done this for thousands of brands already. So we have this incredible bird's eye view of like what works with the push strategy and what doesn't, right? So we're able to adapt to that data and make strategic advice, in real time, as opposed to like a longer learning curve.
I love that. So walk me through a brand who's going to launch an app, right? You guys can build it pretty quick, is what it sounds like. And then there's different strategies for them to, drive people to app downloads, right? If you're on mobile, show different pop-ups, download our app, get a coupon or something, right? Walk me through kind of your launch process for a successful app.
Yeah. So again, anybody can technically build you an app, right? The question is who can help you make it a wild success. And so that's where, over the implementation process, that 10 to 14-day process that I mentioned, as much as we're building the app on one side, we're also setting up strategy calls with you on like how to, market your app, how to get the word out, how to incentivize users to want to take that step to download it. And so developing a launch strategy with you, right? When you think about like how are you going to get that user to download it, like what are the mediums to be able to do that, it's actually there's nothing rocket science about it, right? Think of who you're targeting,
Okay.
your most loyal base. It's just as simple as including in an email campaign, or if you are doing some SMS, including an SMS campaign to drive that app download. Or if you're focusing more on the top of funnel and you want to include it as a part of your, Facebook ads, you can do that and have it tied into Facebook's SDK to drive app installs as a part of your app campaign, right? As opposed to driving to the website where they may come, leave, and never come back again. You can capture them, directly from that Facebook, campaign. So there's multiple ways to go out doing it. Again, nothing is rocket science because it's what brands are already leveraging today for their existing retention marketing efforts, right? Now it's just about partnering with the brand in helping them understand, like, hey, let's understand your customer, what really gets them excited, and then creating a launch strategy to incentivize that adoption.
Yeah, and I think once people run the numbers, it's a pretty easy sell, right? Because look, to your earlier point, and everybody kind of knows this, right? Like the average website conversion rate, what, 2 to 3%, right? Just we could just round it up and say it's 3%, right? So on an app, though, what you guys are seeing on the conversion rate is what?
So a bare minimum
Just
lift.
generally speaking.
Yeah, I mean, a bare minimum lift from what a brand might be experiencing on the website is a 50% lift to the conversion rate, but it'll go as high as 150% lift from what they're experiencing on the website. And that's because of the removing of two major friction points that happen on a website, right? So a brand has what 85% of their traffic coming on mobile. The two major friction points, number one is like a loading time aspect of things, right? When you think of every time the user clicks, there's loading, and that's just a function of what mobile web is, right? But that is something that
Right.
impacts the conversion rate. That is something that hurts the experience for the user, especially with short attention spans, right? And then second,
Oh
is the
yeah.
number of clicks to the checkout, right? On average, for a brand with a mobile website, it's taking 10 to 12 clicks to the checkout, and ultimately, asking too much of the user, resulting in a higher abandoned cart rate. And so imagine if you could just remove that to 2 clicks to check out, right? So those two removing those two friction points sends the conversion rate essentially straight up.
That's amazing. And so people who are kind of contemplating this, like the numbers just make sense. With you guys or anybody else, right? Like you've got to do this. I mean, this is not, should we do it? It's a question of kind of like when do we do it, right?
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I don't want to sound like a commercial either, because at the end of the day, like I'm a huge believer in what we do, but I think it's also a walk the walk mentality too. Like we'll design, build, get a brand's app live into the market, generating downloads with $0 out of pocket, and allow them to see that your revenue lift, retention lift, and conversion rate lift firsthand before they spend that first dollar, right? So that is like one of the value propositions where it's not just about building the app, but you're going to see our team work to help you adopt as well, and see that firsthand before you really have to spend anything. Prove the channel before you invest in it, right?
Right, right. And it's not right. You're exactly right. It's not just, hey, we're building you this app. Hey, good luck. Have fun out there, right? It's there's always going to be refinement. You're going to have to keep tweaking it, right? So I really do love that. What have you guys seen from people who launch apps? Do they stay with you? Do they keep the app out there? Do they see success or do they shut it down? What are the numbers on that from what you guys have seen?
We have net negative churn. In other words, it is a rarity that someone ends up leaving Tapcart. One of a common reason why someone may leave Tapcart is because they decided, app as a channel worked really well for us. Now we want to go custom develop an app from scratch to create some kind of other experience that may not be available with a no code or a low code solution. Totally valid. We've played our role in that process in helping you prove out the app as a channel. But the
Right.
fact is, we take so much pride here. Our churn is next to zero, right? Very few people leave. That's also a
Right.
reason why Shopify is a partner of Tapcarts. They sit on our board of directors. We have an incredibly close relationship with
Wow.
Shopify.
That's amazing.
For the reason is they customers just don't leave. They're just getting so much value from conversion rate lift and retention that they stay.
And I'm sure you've had people come to you, but I want to ask: have people come to you and went, "Hey, look, we tried to custom develop an app and it didn't work, and now we need this out of the box solution, if you will." Have you seen that? And
Yes.
how did that work out for those brands?
Yeah, I mean, they tell a similar story, right? We hired a developer, they built us an app. We were happy at first. It did cost us a lot of money, but then now they're forever reliant on that developer for every small change that needs to be made, right? And that's a difficult thing to keep up with. You got to wait for your developer to, finish lunch before he or she is able to get back to your
Right.
requested change, right? So this is where we were able to disrupt that in a pretty huge way. And then on top of that, you see scenarios where a brand says, "Well, I have these custom features in my custom developed app. How do I bring them over to Tapcart too?" Well, that's where Tapcart you can do that as well, right? Where we have this no-code
Oh
platform
wow.
where you can build 95% of your app using no coding. But if there are custom features that you needed, you can hire any one of your agencies in the world to go custom code a feature on top of your app with Tapcart 2, and therefore you don't have to
Oh wow.
go through the spend of hiring a developer to build from scratch, right? So there's really not a whole lot of limit to what you can do here, and so I think keeping that in mind, by virtue of our service offering, we also serve as backend manager. So we are at our brand's beck and call for app changes too, and turn those around in like 12 hours, right? So
Wow. So, where would you say your sweet spot is with Shopify stores and sellers? Like, who's too small to do something like this? Who's at the perfect size to start really leveraging the power of an app? And I mean, this is super exciting because just like if I see a brand and I'm like, they have an app, I'm like, oh my gosh, like it in a way, it can make you look a lot bigger than you are, right? And it's good for branding and goodwill potentially even, right? Like, oh, these guys are sharp, like guys, gals, whoever, like they've got an app, like they really got this together. Wow.
yeah, I mean, even though the vast majority of merchants that we work with, like 70% of the brands we work with are on Shopify Plus, right? Um, but at the end of the day, it's not the size that determines the success of an app, right? It's actually more of like the loyalty of that brand's audience, right? So we see brands that are like, can be super tiny and be wildly successful with an app simply because they're seeing 60% of their revenues coming from repeat purchases. And if someone's seeing, that that frequency of repeat purchases from, their existing audience, those are the ones that are like perfect candidates for an app. So it's less about size of a brand. It's more about like,
Interesting.
do you have an audience that would be willing to take a step to download the app? And if you have a repeat purchase rate where of like over 20, 25%, then the answer is yes, right? If you are a brand new brand that doesn't have that loyal customer yet, well, it's worth proving it as a channel. You can prove it and see if you can maybe train and teach your customer how you want them to interact with the brand by starting an app in the early part of the journey too. So again, it can be a versatile, tool in many ways.
Yeah, yeah, no, and it sounds like I'm already sold on kind of the front end conversion aspects, but let's talk about lifetime value. Like you're getting into people's phones. You're becoming more sticky, more top of mind with the push notifications. What have you seen with the brands that you work with on LTV of those who have launched an app? I mean, I would assume it's a lot better. I'm sure you're tracking this too, right? What's the story, man?
Yeah. So when you think about, let's just start with the brand's traffic to their website, right? So I challenge anyone who's
Right,
listening to this episode right now to, as they're doing this, pull up your Shopify dashboard, right? Pull up your Shopify dashboard, click on analytics, filter it for the last month, right? And in there, you'd see like, you as a brand are experiencing a certain number of sessions, right? And right in that same box underneath, you'd say, okay, it's coming, those sessions are coming from a certain number of unique users. If you were to divide those numbers by each other, I'm willing to bet that it's somewhere between 1.2 to 1.3 sessions per user per month, right? In other words, the average user is revisiting the brand 1.2 times or 1.3 times per month, right?
right,
Now, when you think of an app, we are at minimum going to triple that figure from each user. And that simply is a function of living on the user's home screen and weaving push into the mix, right? Again, it's something that's just fundamentally not achievable when you're living in a browser, right? When you're living on the home screen, 3x, 4x, 5x the number of sessions from each user. Number two, now you get those users. And who are those users? Those are your most loyal shoppers. They download the app and now they have a shopping experience that has less friction points. The loading times are removed, the number of clicks to the checkout are removed. Boom, conversion rate for your most loyal following goes up as a group by minimum 50%, right? So now when you think of customer lifetime value, you think of your most loyal base visiting for many more sessions than they ever were before, and as a group converting at a higher rate. The average customer lifetime value lift we see here at Tapcart is around 2.5x. In other words, you already have that loyal shopper, and we're gonna
wow.
an app on average is extracting 2.5x more revenue and more sales from the already loyal base, right?
That's amazing. So you're saying if somebody has an LTV of like $100 right now, and they're interested in launching an app, it's so it's $250 is what you're seeing of that base that would download the app. The LTV will increase. The push notifications get them back to the app. They're purchasing more. Who wouldn't do this, Neal?
Reality is, I don't know. Especially since it's something that can be done with zero expense out of pocket. The reality is many are doing it. Tapcart is experiencing record performance right now. We're kind of in this silo, what feels like in the software space and the e-com space, where even though it's a challenged D2C environment, it's because of that challenged D2C environment where brands are saying we need to focus on retention now more than ever. And that's where apps are actually like look more valuable this year and next than they ever have previously in the past. So retention marketing is the game, and finding as many tools as possible to truly own that audience. So hence why, yeah, a lot of brands are doing that, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't get it, you don't get it. That's fine. But if you're listening to this podcast, that means you get it. And look, you don't have to use Neal specifically, but Neal's an expert in this, and he's been doing this. And these numbers are just phenomenal. And it's really a way, in kind of my mind, to future-proof your brand for whatever the hell is coming next. Because look, this is a boxing match, man. People have been fighting iOS 14, boom, boom. If your whole business was built on social media ads, you got wiped. You had to figure something else out with influencers, right? Or affiliates and change your whole model. But a lot of the brands where, I hope they sold it, and I hope whoever took it over figured it out, because that's done. Now, iOS 15, I mean, you're right. The email bloodbath, right? I mean, you're not even getting people's real emails anymore with the hide my email feature from Apple. So you're not even getting this, and everybody goes first party data. You're not even getting it anymore. So it's done, right? And what the stats on email across the board, it's maybe a 20% open rate, 30% if you're phenomenal, right? So that's 1 in 5 to 1 to 3 who are getting. So everybody goes SMS. Okay, now they've gotten to SMS. They've got their targets on that. This is a great way. I mean, I just don't understand why anybody wouldn't do this, especially if you're on Shopify Plus, which for people listening don't know, the normal Shopify plans start at like $29 a month, but Shopify Plus is $2,000 a month, and you get more enterprise level features for your store, and you can do things that, different permissions levels and more apps and Shopify Flow and some custom development features. But having an app, I think it's just kind of the natural progression. But I want to ask you this: where do you see this going in the next year, 2, 3, 5 years? Are we going to see, like, our apps going to get squeezed in the future? Is kind of the question with push notifications.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, first off, there's no way to have a perfect crystal ball on what the future is going to hold. But what we do
I
know is
know, yeah,
we're
sure,
we're we're push notifications as a whole are already living in Apple's world, right? And for better or for worse, I think Apple is very protective of their own ecosystem, which is apps, right? So the better apps perform, the better it is for Apple. The more better push notifications perform, the better it is for Apple, right? So they do have Apple has an indirect vested interest in protecting push because push requires that opt-in when someone downloads it, right? It's already adhering to Apple's policies that have been in place since the very beginning, right? So all of these policy changes are really shaking up the email and SMS and paid social world because Apple's just now laying down the law on all of these components where it used to be the wild, wild west, whereas push notifications and apps always lived as a part of Apple's ecosystem. So that's all we know, right?
yeah, and I'm sure there are fees associated with like submitting to Apple and getting everything approved. Do they charge like a fee per push notification?
No, push notifications. First off, Apple doesn't take any transaction fee associated with any purchases of products, right? Apple only takes a rake of digital goods, not physical goods, right? So physical goods is a T-shirt, it's a watch, right? So Apple doesn't take any share of that. The only fee you pay to Apple is $99, right? On an annual basis, right?
Okay,
That's all you're paying to Apple. Then on the push notification front, again, that's the other value prop of push notifications versus SMS. So you think of some of these elite brands that have these huge SMS subscriber lists, and they're paying close to $1,000 for every 100,000 messages they're sending out. So the more messages you send, the bigger the audience, the more you're paying. Push notifications are unlimited and free, right? And so that's where you're actually able to create two different experiences, right? SMS, because of the cost, is forced to be more transactional. Here's a sale, buy this, right? It's a transactional
right.
type of retention marketing tool because you have to drive that ROI. Whereas with the push notification, you don't need to be worried about every push's ROI because it's free no matter what, no matter it's a
Right.
100,000 people getting it or a million people getting it. And so you're allowed to be more conversational, build a little bit more of a personal connection with the user and build that community as opposed to focusing on a transaction.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I mean, you kind of touched on this earlier. I mean, you're deeply integrated with Shopify. And I think, just kind of a personal bias here, the brands that are going to win are going to have, different elements of personalization, right? And this fits into that, but also into the customer experience. What is the best customer experience? And you're right, 2 clicks. There's brands that have 5, 10 clicks, and there's drop off at every one of those points, and you lose them. And that's why Amazon, to your earlier point about loading times, I mean, every millisecond they're losing hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, it's insane. So this is kind of like the shortcut to a fast loading app, right? Your site that's hyper targeted to the right folks. And really, it's just the best experience because They order on the app. It goes into your fulfillment systems. You can fulfill those orders. The emails go into Klaviyo, whatever your follow-up drip sequences are. Um, it seems beautiful. Now, talking about SMS real quick. SMS is I wouldn't say tricky, but there's all these things that they have where, look, if somebody opts in with a two-step pop-up or whatever, you double up, hey, 5% off if you give us your email, and they go, okay, I'll take it. And then you go 10% off if you give us your phone number right now. And you put in your phone number and they go, okay, you go, okay. Then it sends you a text and you have to add a contact card, right? And they're telling everybody, because the SMS providers are freaking out right now. And they're telling everybody, no, no, no. If somebody opts in, it's really a double opt-in, right? The old school. If somebody opts in and then they go to their phone and they add you as a contact card, as a brand, then you'll get through 100%. Like, we've got deals with the carriers, you're fine. First of all, I don't believe that. And second of all, they really make their money, you're right, on all of the sends. They go, well, it's 5 cents a text message, but you've got a list of 100,000 people. I mean, let's do some quick math here. You got a list of 100,000 people. You're sending a text once a week for 5 cents. Is that right? That's $5,000 just for one? Is my math? No, my math can't be right. Is that
No,
right?
that's right.
That's $5,000.
So
It's
Brent,
$5,000. I mean,
the
it's
average brand we work with is spending about 25,000 a month on SMS, right? It's
because you have to
huge.
pay per SMS. But you could probably get that down if you're doing a bulk. But let's just say it's 1 cent and you're doing 5 a month, right? A lot of brands are going to be doing a lot more here because we're going into Black Friday, Cyber Monday, right? And then, of course, December with all the promotions. So they've really got you by the balls, even though it's first party data, kind of. I would say kind of, right? Because, like, these platforms, and I'm not going to name anybody, right? But if it's same thing with email, right? If you try to migrate email providers, oh, there's warm up periods, right? It's kind of a mess, right, Neil? Like, you
100%.
got to have opt in timestamps. You've got to have, then you got to warm up these new IPs of whoever you've moved to. And same thing with SMS. If people have opted in, you've done this contact card and on this platform with this, number, whatever it is, and you try to move, they're making their money on the fees. So you know, here's what I say: always be wary of whoever you're talking to because they're going to tell you that their solution's the best, right? But of course, apps like this is hard to really argue with because you guys are providing the infrastructure for brands to launch these apps, but then you're also providing the supplementary services of, hey, look, we're kind of doing CRO with you and tracking these metrics, and
Exactly.
it's really a lot more than just launching an app.
You're absolutely right. I mean, again, we're serving as your backend manager, strategy partner, but then even like taking, back to what you said about the SMS providers making the recommendation to their brands to have the users add them as a contact card, right? So now a user opts into SMS, whether it's for the 5%, 10%, whatever it was, and now you're asking the user to say, hey, listen, just so we don't go to a promotions tab or a folder, also add us and put us as a contact just like you would mom or dad, right? What percentage of your users are going to take those extra steps to say, oh, I got this unknown number, now I'm going to add as a
Right.
contact, name it ABC brand. That the percentage is right now, so far the early results saying like less than 5% of users are taking those steps, right? So
Sure.
while that's the tool, that's the only strategy really that an SMS provider can try to say, hey, let's try to mitigate the open rate issue or the report junk issue that's going to be happening. But the reality is like how many users are actually going to do that, right?
Yeah, probably not very many. Where do you see kind of e-commerce as a whole even going to in the next 5 years? I mean, I've got some predictions that I think, but I want to hear your thoughts because you're in this all day, every day as well. Like, where do you see this going? I mean, go ahead. I don't want to prime you with anything. Go ahead.
Well, when you think of I mean, this is the arguably the most difficult D2C climate that we've ever experienced, right? Since 2020. And so when you think about that, like, when you have two, crossing pressures. We have the inflationary environment where consumers are spending more on each thing, more than they ever have before. Therefore, they have less discretionary spend. As a result of it, they're just being that much more choosy with their dollars. And that ultimately is what's, D2C brands are feeling. And then triggered, by what happened in 2020 and our continued lasting effects, you're seeing the supply chain issues really hurt D2C brands and now, making margins thin. And then on top of that, you layer the customer acquisition cost piece, and those are going straight up, right? So everything is having a negative impact on the margins of brands. So now the question is which ones will survive. So when you look at the next 3 to 5 years, it really comes down to less about margin expansion and more about developing a deeper relationship with your customer, right? Deep than ever before, where you develop this hyper loyal base. A loyal base has been the heart and soul of a lot of these brands already, but how do you take that relationship already and take it next level? That's where D2C brands need to focus. How do I make my experience more immersive than ever? When you think of Shopify, it basically opened the floodgates to like dropping the barriers to entry to e-commerce, right? So it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? It was so easy to set up shop, but then now you have all of these competitors that are competing for the same sets of eyeballs, right? And so now, even though some of the weaker brands that kind of just popped up overnight are starting to dwindle and already feeling those effects much earlier than others, it's still going to be up to those top tier brands that are looking to scale. They're going to focus on like what does that customer experience look like. So for me, it's all about CX, right? Customer experience starts with the best in class product. Nothing beats customer experience or retention as a tool than the product itself. And then from there, how do you create different experiences, meet the customer exactly where they are, and create an immersive experience that develops that deeper brand loyalty over the course of the long run?
Wow, that was great. That rehearsed? That was like phenomenal, man.
Come on now. I appreciate that though. Thank
That
you.
was good.
Thank you.
That was good. Really good. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you want to mention, Neil?
Um, really, it's just every brand. I don't want to come off as it being just a Debbie Downer on the SMS world, right? Like that's not my intent here. It's actually more to be as just a DTC enthusiast, a brand advocate. When you think about like, hey, utilize all the tools at your disposal. Don't be reliant on any one single channel or tool in order to drive that success, right? And that's where SMS, push, and email can all work in synchrony with one another, right? To develop a retention marketing strategy that really works, right? Retention is the name of the game, and ultimately, it's just about unlocking all of those potential avenues to meet their customers where they are.
Yeah, I love that. It was funny the other day. I asked somebody, I was like, do you really think SMS is kind of a revenue driver, or is it just another one of those touches that you have to have in the mix, right? And they were like, yeah, it's just really another touch. It's another touch point that helps with the assist, right? It's not going to really drive it, but it helps, right? Um, Look, this was great. If you're spending a bunch of money on SMS and email and you're wondering, hey, what do we do right now in this tough climate? You should definitely explore like checking out an app. Talk to Neal. I'll link everything down below. Neal at Tapcart, all of his info will be in the show notes. So, Neal, I really appreciate you doing this. Great episode. Thank you, brother.
Hey, Preston, thank you so much. You're absolutely amazing. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course.